Hi, this is Dr. Jeremy Flowers, and I am so glad to be able to present to the rest of my CHCA family. I hope that you are having an outstanding and a productive time as you continue to learn at home. I'm also thankful to the administration, the faculty, the staff, and even you, the students of CHCA, for allowing me to participate in this Spiritual Life Emphasis Week. I'm so thankful to be able to present on the topic of love, specifically the letter O in love, which speaks of others. Because really, when we look at our Christian life and our Christian existence, we are called to serve others. And serving others is actually part of what love really is. I don't think I have to tell you that love and Jesus are synonymous and they are intertwined. For John reminds us and tells us that Jesus and God are love, and those that come of them also must show love. I think as we talk about serving others from the thought of love, I think the most appropriate text to use will be Philippians chapter number 2, beginning at verse number 1. In Philippians chapter number 2, verse number 1, the Apostle Paul says, "Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete." Why and how? By being like-minded, having the same love, being one in the Spirit and one of mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, do what? Value others above yourself, not looking to your own interests, but rather to the interest of others. In all of your relationships with one another, have the same mindset of that as Jesus Christ. Understand, as we look very briefly at Philippians chapter 2, this is interesting because the Apostle Paul is talking to a church, which he'll talk about in Philippians chapter 4, has always been giving unto him. They've always supported his ministry. They had no problem with generosity in the entirety of the Philippian church, but obviously there was a subsect of selfishness that was occurring in the body of Christ. So now he counters selfishness for selflessness. He tells them to help others, to empty themselves out, to show the world the love of Christ as Christ has first loved us. And when we look really at the entirety of the Philippians book, we see that the church here is being told to stand firm and stand together. Though you're dealing with pressures from the outside world and dealing with pressures from the inside the body, we must stand firm. And we must continue to have the right mindset as we deal with one another and as we deal with the world itself. So understand, as we look at Philippians chapter 2, verse number 1, it begins with therefore, because it carries over from Philippians 1. If for good study on your own, Philippians 1, 27 begins really the narrative that we're reading about now. But therefore, if any of you have encouragement from being united with Christ, if you have comfort in his love, if you have sharing because of his Spirit, if you have tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete. The word if here is not used as the inquisition. It's not because of a question, but rather, better translated, it should say since. Since we have encouragement from being united with Christ, since we have comfort from his love, since we have common sharing, since we have tenderness, since we have compassion, all these things come because we are united with Jesus. And once we're united with Jesus, we have a fellowship, we have a sharing with one another. And from that relationship with one another and that relationship with God himself, we should have all of the privileges that come from him, whether that be love or tenderness or compassion. And since we have these things in abundance, Paul then says in verse number 2, make my joy complete. In fulfilling these words, and in doing so, we're also fulfilling God's will. When we fulfill the command to be tender, we fulfill the command to be compassionate, when we fulfill the command to love one another, when we fulfill the command to love others and value others over ourselves, we're making the joy not only of Paul complete, but the joy of God complete. He says, look here, since God has done all these things for us, we should have the same love. We should be one in spirit. We should be one in mind. Verse number 3, we should do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. We should not do anything out of arrogance or anything out of pride or anything out of an inflated ego. Another way to look at this text is stop doing things for empty seek glory, but rather seek humility. Value others above yourself, not looking to your own interests. Paul here is talking about balance. Yes, you look to the concerns of yourself because that's only human, but even more so, holy is looking toward the concerns of others. Each of you look toward the interests of others. Verse number 5, in your relationships with one another, have the same mindset, the same mind as Jesus Christ. Christ is love. Christ is humility. Christ is helping others more than himself. Jesus is the very epitome of helping others for himself, because we understand even from when John tells us in the Bible, greater love has no man than this, than the one who lays down his life for his friends. Jesus Christ will self-empty himself on the cross at Calvary. And in the same way, we should then want to empty ourselves out for others, not to the point of death, but also to the point of extreme sacrifice. Why? Because others are important. And the more we align our will with the want of Jesus, then we'll act and operate more like Jesus, in that we will help others even more than ourselves. If we consider ourselves to be something or someone, we should consider others to be even higher than that. So the truth of the matter is, if you look through the rest of Philippians chapter 2, beginning verse number 6, you begin to see a popular hymn, and it really becomes Christological in nature, because it talks about Jesus, how he decides to give up his celestial place in heaven to come down and down the old rugged cross for man. He empties himself out. He doesn't care about equality with the Father, but he cares about saving man. He does all this for others. Romans chapter 5, verse number 8 reminds us that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for the ungodly. Christ is always moving and always giving up so he can help other people. He helps till his own death, so we should be able to help in our own life. And remember this, child of God, as I conclude, even John 3:16, that popular text, reminds us of the self-emptying nature of Jesus. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish, but have what? Everlasting life. Jesus has done so much for us, and now he demands that we do so much for others. Why? Because being humble, self-emptying ourselves, having a spirit of others above us, is in fact what love really is. And if we say we love God, then we have a responsibility to love each other. And 1 John chapter 4 reminds us, how can you say that you love God when in fact you hate your brother? Because the reality is, if we do not love each other horizontally, then we'll never perfect our love with God vertically. If we claim to love God vertically, then we must perfect the relationships we have horizontally. Serve others, help others, because this is what love is. May God keep you, and may he bless you richly.